Now, this is great news. Lyft is finally fighting back against Uber. As you can see right away, new Lyft CEO David Risher, hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly, says rider and driver experience is the top priority as it competes with Uber. As I've mentioned in a bunch of other videos, Uber every month has been getting significantly better, while Lyft every month has been getting worse. No way to sugarcoat that. But now it seems like they're getting ready to basically fight back against Uber. And as you can see right here, looks like this is the picture of him. Looks like he's cycling or something. David Risher, a member of the rideshare's board, stepped into the top job at Lyft on Monday. And this kind of makes sense. I bet they're trying to mix things up or trying to do whatever they can because, like I mentioned, Lyft is really not doing well. And going up to the interview section, Risher told Fox Business on Tuesday getting the rideshare company focused on customers, on its drivers, and its rider in a really sort of basic way and giving them a great experience is a big focus for him. This is one thing I will say when it comes to Lyft. If you talk to most people, I feel like for most drivers and passengers, Uber versus Lyft, which one would you pick? I find 90% of the time, most people prefer Lyft in terms of their friendly atmosphere. I even remember there was like a marketing push Lyft was doing that. It's not about getting from point A to point B per se. It's about the journey of you getting there from point A to point B in terms of having the experience be a friendly one. I think most people do consider Lyft the more friendlier app and Uber the more kind of businessy app, so to speak. I even remember, and I feel like this is not true now because most people drive for both, but I've had people say to me, oh yeah, I heard that every Lyft driver is friendly and every Uber driver is rude. Being honest, that's not true, but I still feel like when you compare the both, most people consider Lyft to be the friendlier app. You know, and then as it says right here, you know, continuing on, I mean, some of this seems basic, but I think sometimes the most basic things are the most important, you know, back to the essentials. We know riders want to be picked up on time. They want to pay a fair price. We know that drivers want a good driving experience. One thing that Risher said, let's just focus on, is rider side is pricing. We have to be priced in line with Uber, he told Fox Business. The last thing I want is for someone to open up two apps and have us be more expensive. And this is, I really respect this perspective. And this is why I kind of want to highlight all these different things he's saying because we all do this. Anybody who's taking a Lyft or Uber, or excuse me, in this case, Lyft and Uber, everybody does this. You pull up both apps. Which one's cheapest? Boom, you go with them. And as you can see, you know, the last thing I want is for someone to pull up two apps, have us be more expensive. So that's one thing we're very focused on, making sure we're priced in line with where the market is. And he also said he's been on quote unquote full on listening mode on what drivers want the most. You know, and I think this is huge that it seemed like he's really going about this in the right way. Obviously, we'll see what happens. You know, him saying this and doing it, two different things, as we all know in the business world, but I do kind of respect him, almost seem like he's getting back to the basics and not making it really complicated. In the most simple way, saying, look, we want people to pay less fares. We want to treat drivers well. We want to listen to feedback on both sides. And as it says here, you know, skipping ahead a little bit, this job is really to get people out and connected on coming together. And even too, he said, you know, you said that he thought the competitor, Uber, I don't know why they mentioned the competitor. That's kind of weird. But it has become the default for too many people, explaining that the ride-sharing business is meant to have at least two players. This is something I've mentioned in a bunch of other videos. And this is why, again, I got to stress, everything he's said and this article that I've been reading really resonates with me because the rideshare business is meant to have at least two players. He indicated choice is good for both riders and drivers. And I agree with that. I think having that mindset and that perspective is saying, look, I just don't want to be the only company. There has to be at least two because having a monopoly over the ride-sharing world, both on the passenger side and driver side, this is like glitching up, is massive, right? And so I think that's just a big thing that I love a lot of what he's saying. And again, skipping down here a little bit, you know, is one thing Lyft can do is reminding the world that we're still a great option, right? Again, Uber is significantly bigger than Lyft, and most people do look at Uber, a great rideshare option. And he said that Lyft has been a little quiet for a while, which is true. And of course, COVID made that tricky because rideshare was on the top of people's minds for a long time. Being honest, I love everything he is saying. Now, of course, like I mentioned, and no kind of hate to him, but saying something and doing it completely different things. But I gotta be honest, as the new CEO of Lyft, I really like all the perspectives he has. A bunch of different things I think he's doing right. Really going about it in kind of the commonplaces way, if that makes sense. What I mean by that is he's looking at it through the eyes of your normal driver and your normal passenger. Like I mentioned, everybody does this. Everybody takes out Uber and Lyft when ordering one, picks whichever one is cheapest. Like say drivers, pull up the apps, whichever one's paying more that night or that weekend, or that week, depending on your area, you're gonna drive for them. You go where their money goes. Like to be honest, money is the biggest thing. The biggest complaint from every driver and every passenger, and this is kind of like a two-sided issue, I guess a third side if you add the investor side, but the drivers versus the passengers, the biggest thing is the pay. Passengers want to pay as least or as small as possible for the ride. Drivers want to get paid the most and get the most amount of money overall from doing these rides. And I think this is kind of like a tricky balancing act, but I think everything he's mentioning is huge. I think also too, it kind of, stinks to say, but being self-aware and being just overly, I guess, aware of the whole situation that, yeah, Uber has been dominating the market. They've been getting bigger and bigger. Most people think of Uber when it comes to ride sharing. I mean, I've even seen sometimes when traveling, we've probably all seen this, the different hotels, airports, especially everything, have, quote unquote, ride sharing areas. I have seen, it's rare, but I have seen it more and more frequently where some ride sharing pickup areas say Uber and other ride sharing companies, as opposed to other areas say both Uber and Lyft and stuff like that. Uber's always been the most dominant one. They're in more places in the world as well. So when people think of ride sharing, they immediately kind of connect Uber to that. And as you mentioned, Lyft has really been the underdog. I mean, they've been kind of not doing the best, as I mentioned in a bunch of other videos. And personally, I'm not happy about this. I think, weird analogy, but as I've said in other videos as well, it's kind of like the yin and yang of ride sharing. You do really need both. And I think the big issue that he's brought up is both the underdog situation, drivers not being happy, passengers not being happy. And I think one thing Lyft has over Uber, among a couple of different things I will say, but I think it's having this friendly perspective and this real world perspective of what needs to take place to make drivers happy and riders happy. No, of course, we'll have to see what happens. But I think one big thing that I like a lot is it seems like Lyft just really hasn't done anything. Uber, and I've mentioned this in so many videos. I've done a ton of videos about like Uber Charter in terms of booking a party bus, Uber Parking if you want to rent a parking spot, renting a car through Uber, Uber Explore if you want to book a hotel, Uber Travel now. I mean, Uber's doing all these different things. Uber Eats, of course, is another big one, right? Uber, Shop and Pay, basically rivaling Instacart. Uber's doing all these different things and they're growing bigger and bigger. And it seems like Lyft hasn't really been trying anything new. And if you do what you've always done, you'll be where you've always been. And it seems like Lyft just has been kind of subtly doing its own thing in the background, as in just doing everything normally and just kind of pretty much steadily plateauing, especially since the pandemic, or in this case, if anything, more tanking, I hate to say it. So I would like that this is a new, fresh perspective, getting a new CEO on board, really kind of bringing things back to the basics. Let me know what you think in the comments for all my drivers out there. If actually you do prefer Uber or Lyft, which one you kind of resonate with more. But I really do like this. I think this is a fresh perspective, kind of a fresh person getting in, going back to the most simple things that we all know and love, and kind of the values that a lot of passengers want when ordering a ride-sharing company, whether it's Uber, Lyft, or another one. And the same thing with drivers. This is a huge sign for a lot of big things to come. And I'm really excited about this because as Uber's gotten bigger and Lyft's gotten smaller, it makes me really worried. And this is the first sign I've seen in maybe years that things now could be on the upside for Lyft.